From Glitch HQ on Riverside Avenue in challenging, time-sensitive Minneapolis, this is Nice Games Club, the show where nice game devs talk gaming and game development.
I'm Martha McGarry, and I make nice games.
I'm Stephen McGregor, and I make nice games.
And I'm Arthur Croy, I too make nice games. For this week's episode, our topics are resource management in games and boss battles. And so, if everyone's ready, let's start.
What's up, y'all?
Whoop, whoop.
Are we testing out catchphrases? I didn't bring one.
You didn't get the memo? That's okay. You can use my dang for this episode.
Oh, okay, cool. I'll do that. I'll work up to it.
All right. Welcome, new listeners, if you're new.
Yeah, we did notice a bit of a spike recently,
Yeah.
and we've been making some outreach at GDC and elsewhere, and so we wanted to sort of take some time out of the top of this episode just to say hello, welcome to the show.
Hi.
Yeah.
Please dig into the archives and listen to all our old episodes, because then we don't have as much pressure on this and episode next week.
Yeah.
But yeah, we do this at the end of the show. We talk about how to get in touch with us, and please like and subscribe and all that sort of thing that creators are now forced to make part of their artistic endeavors.
Yeah.
But we thought we'd just talk a little bit at the top. If you want to get in touch with us, at Nice Games Club, it's where we're on Twitter.
Yes.
And contact at Nice Games Club if you have questions about the show, if you want us to address a topic, or any follow-ups or criticisms or whatever. We're happy to hear from you.
Yes.
And of course, review us on Apple Podcasts and wherever you get your podcasts, because that helps even more people listen to us. And we don't really hammer that home a lot, but it's really important because we're a niche program with a niche audience, and we want to reach you. So if you like what we do, hopefully you can take a couple minutes to help us bring it to more people.
Yeah.
I've got an itch in nature, no matter what you say. I've got an itch in nature. It's going to stay that way. I have an itch in nature. And so do you. Everything that's living has an itch in nature too.
Yeah.
There we go. That was
Wonderful.
Review that
Song for you.
performance. on the podcast.
Did I have enough resonance and presence? I've been taking some voice lessons recently. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. How's that going?
It's been really fun.
Yeah.
I've just had one, but
Okay.
See, there we go. I just messed up. It's making me think a lot about consonants and resonance in your face, like making parts of your face vibrate while you're talking so that it will make more vibrations for people to hear, and sitting up straight and all of those things.
Yeah.
So it's very
And
exciting.
as you do that, I am more cognizant of it. I'm sorry, listeners. You are now too. Martha, you're going to the League of Legends Championships?
Yes, the NA championships for the spring split in St. Louis,
I don't know
Missouri.
what any of those words mean.
Oh, well, there's the spring split and then there's the summer split, which are the two different.
Oh, I got it.
Well, like,
kidding.
so you play, it's like the seasons.
Yeah,
so like
okay.
spring
Oh,
season,
gotcha.
summer season.
Yeah.
And then at the end of those, they add up all the points everyone's got and then do the
The finals? Or something?
finals.
Okay.
Cool.
So this is just the end of the spring season.
Mhm.
Basically. So, yeah, I'm really excited. We got really good seats,
Ooh.
and it's gonna be great.
Mhm.
And maybe Sneaky will be there, and he's my favorite. And yeah,
Awesome. Well, I
I
hope
will.
to
Yeah,
hear more about it in a future episode.
I will definitely report back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've talked about it on the show before, but you don't play League of Legends anymore, right?
No.
But you watch it a lot.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's true for a lot of people, I imagine. It's
I
become a
think
real
so,
sport
yeah.
in that way. Yeah.
I mean, ESPN shows the finals,
Yeah.
so which is really cool.
Yeah.
Dang, we've come a long way.
I know, right?
Mhm.
Man.
And I'm sure I've asked you to do this on a previous episode, but like describe to me the appeal of viewing a match.
Because like you wouldn't, I had the same reaction when Dylan was like, we're going to watch League of Legends now. And I was like, oh my God. Lol. No, we're not. But like, it's just as fascinating as watching a sport, like a physical sport, because,
Well, that's fine, but what's the appeal?
well, because you don't know what's going to happen. And sometimes like some games are boring. Like you're like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
Especially if one team is so much better than the other one and they just crush
yeah.
But that's never fun to watch. And that's been the past couple worlds has been like one Korean team beating everybody. And it's like, okay, well, why even bother? But when there's two teams that are like evenly matched, it gets so tense. Like you're watching, like you just don't know what's going to happen. And then people can pull off these amazing like shows of skill. Like they do something totally risky, but then it pays off in the end. And like they end up like watching the underdog come back up through the ranks and things like that. That's it. Like the story of it is really fun to follow, I guess.
And at these big tournaments, I've seen clips of this stuff and how it's in a stadium and they put it. Of course, people who are like cynical about this, like, older folks will be like, I just watching a bunch of people play on their computers, But like, I'm actually curious as to how physically these events are staged.
Yeah, I'm really curious because even though they have cameras and stuff like that, and you can see like where the audience is and stuff, it still will be interesting to see what the experience is like because like whenever they go into gameplay, all of that goes away, and on your screen you just see what the players see. So it'll be really interesting to see what the experience is actually sitting physically there, because that focus won't happen. So,
yeah, I bet it's a similar experience to like watching a basketball game in the courts, or not in the courts. I'm not trying to get trampled by basketball players, but seeing them like live, like in person. It's like. Because I've gone to some basketball games and like it's a very different experience. It's like way less serious because there's always like halftime shows and things like that, and they like throw T-shirts at you so you can get free things and stuff like that. It's like way less serious than it would be when you're watching it on TV. They take it way more.
Where the announcer is like has a very serious demeanor,
right? Yeah, and a stern voice and stuff.
Right, but it's a circus.
Yeah, it really is.
That's what sports is. Yeah.
Well, yeah. There was a PhD student at the theater department at the U of M when I was in that department, and her whole thesis was on the theater of sport and how the show captures people.
Yeah.
So I'm excited. It's going to be at least it'll be entertaining if nothing else.
Part of it, I think, is just going to be being in the same room with a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because I think that's true, for like a football game or a baseball game. A lot of times you just watch it on the Jumbotron.
Yeah.
So it's not really different from an esport exactly. You can maybe take a glance over at the dugout or something, but like how much better of an experience is that in terms of the game itself? But it's about the being there, right?
With all the other fans, just like we talked about in our fandom episode.
Yeah.
Are you going to get like glow sticks or LED?
Yeah, we're going to wear our jerseys and all of that stuff. I'm very excited. So
take some pictures.
I will if I'm allowed to.
Cool. So should we get started with my topic?
No.
Oh.
Okay, now it's fine.
Yay! So, and
wait. Okay, go ahead. New listeners, you're in for a treat.
Oh boy, that's too much pressure. So in League of Legends, for example, you have to manage. No, that's dumb. You have to.
Okay.
I feel like we're watching golf now.
She's teeing up the shot.
Right?
Steven, we don't want to lose our new listeners.
Resource management in games. That's what we're talking about.
Just like you have to manage your talking on podcasts.
Yes. Exactly.
One of your patented transitions, TM. It's one of the greats. Put that on a wall.
Yeah.
Put that one on a t-shirt.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, guys.
You're fine.
Some days you got one, some days you just don't.
Yes, resource management in games. I'm not talking about like resource management in developing games, because that's like...
We are sick of talking about that.
Yeah. Exactly.
Scope.
I'm talking about things like mana when you're a wizard or something in a game.
Right.
Wizard needs food badly.
Yes, health is a resource. I actually did not take notes on that, but like, because I guess I didn't necessarily want to talk about health, but that is a resource. These kinds of things, they game developers put in your game to like limit you in some way, or to change your thinking about like how to approach these abilities.
Right.
Like cooldowns. Like in League of Legends, there are cooldowns.
Yes.
And there's something you have to manage.
Yes.
Wow, a rare treat. One of Martha's patented late transitions.
Wonderful.
Wow, you're getting the whole Buffalo this episode.
Continue.
Yes. Okay. Fingens has an abundance of it. In fact, had way more resources than it needed in the past. But like I've been developing games with a bunch of resources and stuff for a while. But this is just the stuff I've found and learned about and researched. But I'd love to hear other people's thoughts of these things because, like, I love talking about really esoteric game design concepts.
Yeah.
So yeah, why would you add these resources to your game? Why can't you just, allow me to always use all the things all the time at any point? Because that's not as fun as you'd think it would be. Games generally need a limit in some way, because otherwise you're just, or you're making a sandbox game, which is, fine, but it's a different kind of game. And they can lead to like interesting systems and stuff, and because like you have to think about what you have to think about how you're using your moves and how you're using them so that you can save your resources for the right time, or you really need them at this moment and you want to just spend them all. It gives the game some high points and low points. And you have to make interesting decisions as you're doing it. And it can really signify the importance of your abilities. Because like something that costs like all of your mana is going to be extremely powerful versus something that costs like 1 mana is gonna, you can use it all the time, but it's not going to do that much.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I wanted to bring up like the different types of stuff and the different things you can do with them. At least, and from what I've found from it, like the different feelings you get from like approaching a game with this resource.
Yeah.
So like mana is the pivotal one. I don't know, the one that everybody thinks about, magic and stuff like that.
Action bar.
Yes, your action bar. Yeah. I found that it encourages like a smart use of your move set, because you always have this resource, and mana specifically generally like recharges over time.
Is that true generally for most games?
Okay. Most games do tend to have that. And in fact, they will make it a stat that you can improve upon later.
Right.
But like it allows you to use your abilities whenever you want. But if you run out of resources, then you cannot use your abilities anymore. So you need to be smart about which ones you're using and why you're using them and when you're using them.
I think in a lot of turn-based games, you'll have to like use mana potions or whatever because not very many things are over time at that point.
Yeah, I think that's I guess I probably have more experience with like turn-based RPGs in fantasy settings.
Yeah.
Because I don't like fantasy setting games, so I tend to miss out on a lot of games. But yeah, mana to me is just almost like ammunition or like a generic resource. But in terms of it being a renewable resource, like it being attached in the same neighborhood as cooldowns, I don't always think of it that way. But that's basically its common use.
And like mana and cooldowns are kind of very similar, except like it's effectively a cooldown for your entire moveset as opposed to cooldown for one specific ability.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
This also explains a lot of the design that Fingens used to have.
Yes.
Where you did have those as separate elements.
Yep.
And I remember that confused me greatly.
Yes.
And I'm glad you've taken it out, but now see where it comes from.
Yeah. I wanted to get into that too, because we used to have an energy meter, but we decided to get rid of it, particularly because we wanted to change up what people were feeling in the game.
Mm-hmm.
I found that like mana and stuff, like mana costs can really emphasize the power of ability. If something costs a lot of mana, then you know it's going to be very powerful.
Yeah.
Even if you don't necessarily say this thing deals a lot of damage or whatever.
It's an effective language.
Yes.
Because and power gets to be abstracted. So like you say, damage is one expression of power.
Yes.
But also area of effect is another expression of that.
Or
duration or anything.
Yeah, exactly.
And a player understanding power as being something that can apply to multiple things is it's a really easy way to explain that to somebody.
Yes. Yeah, you can just look at a number and go, this is a higher number. So it's probably better.
Right, yeah.
You can also like change the power curve that a player is experiencing in the game by like giving them a certain amount of stats and stuff that will allow them to almost mitigate the necessity to like pay attention to your mana costs in a lot of instances. Like for example, if you have 100 mana and then you get 1 mana every second, and your ability
and you're going 60 miles per hour.
Right, yeah. Maybe I'm being a little bit too detailed about it. But just like in an instance where like you need to, if you need to be like League of Legends specifically, I've noticed has this like curve where the first state of the game, a lot of times you need to pay attention to what abilities you're using because your mana is so limited, and once you're running out of mana, your opponent can capitalize on that and kill you. Whereas later on in the game, you've accumulated enough items so that like your mana costs are not nearly as important as they were in the past. Mm-hmm. You can spam things as much as you want, but all your other your opponents can also do that, and so like that's still something you have to consider. And so as a result, that game also has cooldowns. Cooldowns are much more important in that point than mana is. And a lot of RPGs use mana systems like this, turn-based ones in particular, but they're also popular in action RPGs like League of Legends and things like that. Also cooldowns, those are specific to like abilities most of the time. Where like when you use this ability, you have to wait a few seconds before you can use it again. This thing like encourages you to approach your abilities just using them when you need them. Especially high cooldown ones, because if you use an ability that takes 2 minutes to cool down, if somebody comes at you in a minute and you need this ability, you're screwed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's useful in that is that when you make that mistake, you don't ever blame a developer for that.
Yeah.
and so it's an easy way to teach strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've also found that like this is an easier thing to balance around, specifically when you're like giving items and things to your players or your builds or whatever to make yourself more powerful. Because as long as you're not like giving players cooldown reduction all over the place, then like it's a fairly balanced system. You've already balanced it by using the cooldown numbers. But like they don't really scale well into like late game stuff. Like I said, oftentimes you want to prevent players from getting too much cooldown reduction. And by cooldown reduction, I mean like taking your thing and like a 5-second thing and reducing it by 25% or something. Because then eventually, if you give them 100% cooldown reduction, then your cooldowns literally do not matter. And so
there was a mode that almost made me play League of Legends again, where they took away all cooldowns.
Is that that's the Earth mode? Yeah. Ultra rapid fire.
Yeah.
That's fun. There's a whole League of Legends. We should probably have an episode of League of Legends. It's a whole thing.
Pretty much, yeah.
But I'm
gonna be sick that weekend.
Fair enough. But yeah, like if you reduce your cooldowns too much, then like the actual cooldown is arbitrary and unnecessary.
Right.
And then you can just do whatever you want. And
but
then
also if you reach that point over time, it's a feeling of empowerment to a player.
That's true. Yes, but it's still like that. It scales to a point where like it's too much power, and then you're in a sandbox mode again.
Well, can't you always just increase somebody else's numbers? Like,
I suppose that's true. There's always another way.
I mean, then it's different between like PvE versus PvP, right?
Yes.
How you do these sorts of things?
Yeah, totally. I guess from this in particular, I'm thinking of this in a PvE setting mainly,
Okay.
but in a PvP setting, yeah, you don't want people throwing their most powerful abilities at you literally every second they can. So yeah, action games use a lot of this thing. In particular, like Risk of Rain. I brought it up in the last episode, but Risk of Rain 2 just recently came out as of 2 weeks ago. Calendar math. It has a lot of cooldowns and stuff, and like your more powerful abilities have longer cooldowns, so you try to save those for opportune moments, and the most efficient moments, and that could be like a fun approach to the game. At least that's something I enjoy a lot. Yes, and then there's ammo systems, which is always found in, well, not always, but oftentimes found in shooters and such. It's kind of similar to mana, except you need to actively find your ammo most of the time, and so it can encourage exploration. In fact, like Doom does this very well, where like you have a limited ammo source, but like the game itself has quick movement and encourages you to like actively look for ammo so you can keep shooting at things, because if you can't shoot at things, you can't win. But I found that like a lot of games nowadays a lot of shooters nowadays do not really use ammo in interesting ways. It's just like an old system that they kind of retroactively put into the game because it
seems like
shooting,
especially in third-person action games that I've played recently. It seems like ammo is there just to get you out of cover.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you could just shoot from where you are forever and kill all the enemies. But it's the only time you ever run out is when you're camping somewhere.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you pretty much always have as many bullets as you need for all your various guns.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of weird because then it's a mechanic that kind of hits you unexpectedly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, the game, like a lot of newer games, tend to encourage you to be just shooting constantly till you can't anymore. And they oftentimes will throw an abundance of ammo at you. I guess until the developers decided that you shouldn't have that ability.
Well, the problem I have with games like that is that I always have max ammo.
Yeah,
and if I shoot 3 bullets and I'm down 3 bullets, and there's a bunch of ammo packs like behind me, I'll go back for them.
Yeah,
because like I always want to have max ammo for every situation.
Yeah.
It ends up being kind of debilitating. It doesn't give me, weirdly, even though they put all this ammo out, it means I always have a full magazine.
Yeah.
And then I want to keep my full magazine.
Yeah. That's totally it.
Almost the opposite of what they think it's giving you more ammo gives you.
Don't you want to open all the boxes though?
Well, there's that. That's a big motivation for Dale. My wife will, playing Tomb Raider, she every time she opens an ammo cache, she's like, box punching. She like sings it and just this little,
That's great.
Yeah. And when she is maxed out on something, she's super bummed out that she can't trigger the box punching animation.
That's why playing multiplayer Borderlands 2, which I rant about a lot, as you all know, if you're playing multiplayer, you can always pick up ammo no matter if you can have it, you are full or not,
right?
Because the other player might need it. So the game will just let you pick it all up all the time because it's shared between everyone. So it's really great. It makes box opening way more fun.
Yeah, that's something I had an issue with in the older Borderlands because like there would be ammo and like I don't even use the ammo, but I'm full in it, and I was like, I there's a pickup, I can't pick it up. No. Like I like it when games encourage you to actively find ammo or encourage you to actively like build up resources. So like I think there are instances like the new Doom. Just because we just talked about okay, it's not really a joke.
Well, when you mentioned Doom before, I wasn't sure if you meant 1992 or 2016 Doom.
Yeah, I haven't,
but it's kind of true of both.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like the newest one encourages you to like, well, specifically with health, it encourages you to actively, go up in front of enemies and punch them, so you can spill out health and also blood and guts.
Yeah.
And so that game like encourages you to keep moving and run into enemies and kill enemies.
Yeah, it's an anti-cover shooter.
Exactly. Yeah. Where and so I think that I'm not sure exactly how like the game manages ammo specifically, but I know that like with health, which is your ultimate resource, if you run out of health, you lose the game. It gives you the incentive to keep moving. So I like it when ammo is used in that kind of a way, which encourages you to like do interesting things in the moment because you're running out of ammo. And now that I think about it, battle royales are kind of bringing ammo systems back. Because like you start out in the game with like no resources and you have to actively find them or compete with other players in order to get those resources. And that's really interesting.
Yeah.
That's why they're so popular right now. A little too popular, but that's a separate discussion. And then as like a small thing, I wanted to bring up super meters because it's a fighting game thing. And you know how I am about fighting games. Oftentimes with super meters, like
this is like the EX or whatever meters.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. In like Street Fighter, for example, you build meter when you deal damage to your opponent, or your opponent deals damage to you. And so as a result,
it's like a participation trophy.
A little bit. Okay. You get more. I think you get more meter when you deal damage to things. Okay. But I mean, like you can use it as a comeback mechanic too, because once you're, as you're building meter, you get access to more powerful abilities. But you have to use up that meter in order to use it. And so you can use that, like if you're getting stomped, but you see an opportunity to use your super meter, you can use it, and then like you can get back into the game.
Yeah.
But it can also be used as a way to end a game quickly if you're, if you're stomping somebody and you see an opportunity to end them quickly, then you use it. And it also moves a lot of the decision making towards the end of the game. Or a lot of that kind of decision making towards the end of the game. So like you start the game with just your base abilities, and then like your abilities expand over time, which is a neat thing that I like about fighting games and such. I know other games also have like super meters and things like that. I guess like talk about it like in Treasure Stack, we're adding a sort of a meter thing now.
Yeah.
Where maybe I shouldn't talk about this. I don't know.
Ooh, secrets.
Yeah. I'll talk about it in another episode. Maybe.
Okay. But puzzle games of that variety.
Yes, they do have super meters as you make matches and such like that. Yeah. You'll like build up meter, and you can use that to send a block to your opponent or other special thing.
Right. Tetris 99 like has a whole spin on that. Where you can like target players.
Yeah. As you make matches. Yeah. I don't think it has a super meter specifically, but I know like Super Puzzle Fighter has super meters because
I just mean more generally the idea of being able to like use your successes to build up an attack of some kind.
Yeah, that's totally in Tetris 99 stuff. Yeah. The nice thing about all these resources is a lot of them are mix and matchable. League of Legends has both mana and cooldowns. And in fact, like there are some characters that have like different kinds of resources. Like there's this group of characters like the ninja characters that have, what's it, or key or something. I don't remember what it's called. But like
we're gonna not look that up or put it in the show notes.
Yep. It recharges extremely quickly compared to mana, but you only have like 100 of it compared to like a lot of people's mana pools are like 1,000.
Mm-hmm.
And so like you can throw a bunch of abilities really quickly, but then you're just out of abilities. Whereas another person has to be more cognizant of what abilities they can use. But they are more likely to be, but they'll eventually run out of abilities to use.
Some don't have, there's the one character, Zach, I think, who doesn't even have mana.
Yeah.
His mana and health are combined. So if you use your ability, you hurt yourself.
Yes.
Because he's this big glob creature.
Yeah, and that changes up your like decision making because like if you're using an ability, you're also hurting yourself. So like, are you using too many abilities? Is this gonna bite you in the rear end later on?
Yeah.
Things like that.
And that's not a totally uncommon mechanic.
No.
Sometimes it's like an optional bonus will be like using this weapon will hurt you or whatever. Mm-hmm. But it's always based on this idea of like you have a lot of power, but you can only sometimes feel safe to use it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Oh man. I love this discussion. I love these discussions. So for example, with Fingens, we had originally designed the game to have an energy meter and it had cooldowns. Mm-hmm. And we migrated against it largely because like it unnecessarily like complicated a lot of people's decision making in the moment to moment gameplay.
And for people unfamiliar, Fingens is it's like a Twitch action game.
Yes, it's a cooperative side scrolling shoot 'em up. Yes,
right. So managing that sort of things required a little more cognitive overhead than players were comfortable with in the moment.
Yes. Yeah, and then we were comfortable forcing players to go through in the moment.
You were comfortable with for a good long while.
We were, yes.
I remember I didn't like it a lot, and I remember like arguing with you guys like this is not great.
Yeah, well, I mean, and the game is better for changing it, frankly. So thanks.
Well, I mean, you came to it on your own, but I remember being like initially being turned off by it.
Mm-hmm. But it makes it more complicated because like shoot 'em ups are already like you have to pay attention to a lot of things that are happening on the screen already.
Yeah.
So like adding the necessity to not only balance whether or not your ability is available due to cooldowns, but also whether or not you have the resource to spend that to use that ability was too much. The reason why we added it in is because like in Fingens you can purchase things that will increase your abilities and it would increase your like energy recharge rate and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so we wanted more stats for people to be able to
You built a system that was very flexible and had ability to add a lot of variety.
Yes.
So you wanted a mechanical system to accommodate that.
Yes.
And I think you in anticipation of using that a lot more than you probably ended up doing.
Yeah, actually, yeah. We did experiment with other like sources of things too. Like we had one of our characters used to have like an ammo system. They didn't have to find ammo, but like it would recharge over time, I guess. But like it was you only had like 4 instances of it, and you had to wait like 30 seconds before you could use it again or something.
Right,
like that.
right. And it was like the big shotgun shell things. Right?
Yeah. We've experimented with a bunch of different things at the time because Fingens was inspired a lot by like RPG mechanics and stuff, but we wanted to implement that and it was shoot 'em up. We went back and forth on it. I guess we talked it through and stuff, and we decided to get rid of the energy because it wasn't necessary to add that additional cognitive load. I think that like the game is a lot better for it. It's simpler and more approachable. And part of the reason why we designed the the game is to make the game more approachable, make shoot 'em ups more approachable for people. So
ultimately, it was a clash with the sort of the UX of the game,
Yeah.
and that the system. There's nothing wrong with the system itself.
Yeah.
It's just that like it was hard to display on screen,
That too,
communicate
yeah.
to users, and all that needed to happen repeatedly over and over again as the game went on. And so there was nothing wrong with the system.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's just you couldn't find a way to communicate it to players without subtracting from other systems.
Yeah, and I want to take this moment to emphasize how crucial it is to play test your game because, like, because like if we had just played the game on our own, we had grown accustomed to the energy meters, but if we hadn't shown it off to people, we wouldn't have known how difficult it was to actually manage all of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really valuable. I wanted to bring up Metro Nexus too because like that has an interesting resource that like you build over time. So if you could explain that a little bit.
In Metro Nexus, it's a 4-player competitive multiplayer game.
Yeah.
And you drive over this little tile. I'm sort of describing it. We haven't talked about the game in a while because we've been working on Widget Satchel for so long. But you drive over these platforms on a single screen, and when you drive over them, you fill them with your color, so you claim them for yourself. So it's like Splatoon, and it keeps track in the HUD of points, basically every tile you collect.
Yeah.
But you can also remove tiles, either your own or your opponent's, to charge your weapon.
Yeah.
And so the ultimate result of it is that the score essentially is constantly changing, balancing between players. And so the resources you manage are how many points you have, which is territory.
Yeah.
And then to a much lesser extent, the charge on your weapon.
Yeah.
Because that's not it's a meter that fills up quickly and then it has a max and then you just fire it. So it's just like it's like drawing a bow. Is basically the mechanic. So really the resource is your points.
Yeah.
And so hearing you talk about just how much you love all these systems, like, and we've had this discussion before, like, I don't like numbers in video games.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to balance my checkbook. Like, I'm much more interested in resources that change the state of play.
Yeah.
And so in Metro Nexus, you want a higher score than your opponent, but you don't care what your actual score is, right? And but in fitting with another theme of the game, there are players who want a maximum amount of available points.
Right, yeah.
And so you can play it in a different way. You can play it either just to have more than your opponent, which means you can focus on removing their territory and less about gaining yours, because you can only spend your time on so many things at once.
Right.
Or you can focus on maximizing your own ability and trying to stay out of the way of other players who are all fighting for what's left. And so, which is I've come to realize is a theme in the games I make, which is designing like multiple ways for players to approach it that are equally valid.
Yeah.
And that's been thinking of it in those terms, like is worked really well for me designing the system. Thinking like, what's the empowerment players are going to have by getting a lot of points? Well, it's temporary. And so what's the remedy for it feeling temporary? Well, then you need to have the ability to affect other people's resources.
Yeah.
In a way that is equal to how they can affect yours or how chance can affect it. But generally, I'm not concerned about somebody knowing what their score is.
Yeah.
Really. Because I'm not really I don't really like that in games very much. I don't like keeping track of my inventory or mana or even health necessarily.
Sure.
I like to know if I'm low on health. I don't really care what my health number is, I suppose.
And really a lot of games are like designed in that way so that like you don't know your actual health numbers, but like you can see there's a red vignette when you are low on health and stuff like that.
Right. I think developers have gotten a lot better over the years about knowing what players actually retain.
Yeah.
And then whether the system, like, you can see your ammo amount, but like also if you change the color of the number as it gets lower, then players will understand that as like a state change.
Yep.
We do that in Widget Satchel. When you get more widgets, your weight increases in tiers. So you don't necessarily need to worry about how many you have, or like what tier of number you have.
Yeah.
It makes it mechanically not less complicated, in fact, but it makes it much easier to understand.
Yeah.
And Metro Nexus is like that to its logical extreme, basically.
Yeah.
Which is also why when you pick up their power-ups in the game, which change what your weapon does, you can only ever hold one. So you can't... I did briefly toy with the idea of like picking up a couple of different power-ups and using them in sequence or cycling which one you're using. But ultimately, that wasn't mechanically interesting enough to account for the fact that it was complicated for players to understand.
Yeah.
So simplicity and elegance is always what I want to go for, which shouldn't be the enemy of like actual like gameplay complexity.
Yeah.
You know.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, there's a bunch of different ways to go about it. That's what's nice about these is that you can just put whatever you want in it, and it'll probably work.
Well, that's the thing about it is there is a way to make any version of it make sense.
Yeah.
You just have to make sure it works for your game.
Yes.
And a lot of times you'll find that like this is what I like about games, but it's not what's working for my game.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sometimes it's hard to actually find that balance to make the changes you wouldn't necessarily want to if it's different from your vision of it.
Yeah.
For example.
So, listeners, you've made it all the way through the dungeon. You have collected all the things and defeated all of the enemies. And here you are in the penultimate room. And there's boxes for you to get the last bit of items and cooldown reductions and all those things you need before you enter the boss arena. Which is this topic. Boss battles! Dun, 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 dun.
That's our theme.
Mm-hmm.
That's not our theme. Oh,
Da,
wait.
da, da,
If
da,
you're
da.
a boss, then the Nice Games intro theme is our theme song.
It's always our theme song.
No, I know, but I mean like as a boss theme song. That doesn't make any sense. Never mind.
Dun, dun,
Martha
dun,
executed
dun,
a
dun, dun,
perfect transition.
dun,
I know,
dun,
and
And
dun,
you
dun,
had to go in and make it awkward, which means it's still a perfect transition. Martha, this is your topic.
Yes.
Yes. Boss battles, which
Mm-hmm.
are really fun, or it can be really fun.
Yes.
How can we make them really fun? So I was talking to my boyfriend Dylan about this, and his big thought about bosses is that his favorites are ones that have found a balance between making a boss really unique and memorable,
Mhm.
but also not overwhelming the player by introducing new things that they've not done before.
Oh,
So they like
yeah.
fit with the level that they're in. Like they're a culmination of everything you've learned, but also like throw a little unique twist in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of like good boss battles are basically like final tests at the end of an of your, what semesters. That's what they're called. At the end of your semester, you
Where to
know,
put it.
yeah, you've learned all these lessons. You've gathered all of this knowledge, and now this is the test. In order for you to pass, you need to defeat this boss. That is oftentimes how they're used. Sometimes though, they will add like random mechanics and things that had nothing to do with what you just did. That's the most frustrating.
That metaphor is incredibly useful because
Yeah.
when a boss battle is bad, it's because it feels like it includes material that wasn't part of the course.
yeah, yeah.
Or is too much the same. Like it's so easy because it's not any different than any of the other things you just defeated.
Yeah,
It just
right,
happens
like-
to be in its own room.
Yeah,
Or-
why did I study this hard
Yeah.
for this?
Yeah.
someone hyped you up for it's gonna be so hard, and then
Yeah.
it's like the easy questions.
Mm-hmm.
Metaphor still works. I think one thing that makes boss battles good is some of the like game architecture around them.
Oh.
Like the most frustrating thing to me is getting to the boss and then not being able to defeat them the first time, and then having to go back so far in a level. Like there's
Sure.
some where your save points are not necessarily set up in a great way, so you have to like traverse stuff again to get to the boss again. So
Right.
every attempt at the boss is represents like so many hours of work, and that makes me just want to stop the game.
Yeah, it makes those post checkpoint pre boss areas basically part of the boss fight.
Yes,
And
yeah,
if they're, yeah.
yeah, exactly. And I think another thing is like having something right before the boss that lets you like get back to your best self after the level is
Yeah.
really nice for players because it gives them like a fair shot at the boss.
Yeah.
Oftentimes they'll telegraph that you're about to go to the boss when you get into the penultimate room. But before that, you're like, oh man, I gotta kill this thing. It's really hard. Spend all of my mana. I don't have any mana left. Let's go. Oh dang it, the boss is next.
Yeah.
And then you're just screwed unless like it gives you resources to recharge.
But a lot of times, sometimes you'll see the weapon cache before the boss.
Yeah.
And that can feel good to a player, but part of it feels like a cop-out from the developer. It's like they didn't balance it enough to make you feel ready for the boss, so they have to like account for all the different... Because there's going to be a bunch of different user states, right? You either just barely make it to the room, or you like stroll through with all your stuff, and then that experience is going to be very different for those two players.
That's true.
And a developer doesn't always want to account for it. But there are a lot of times the simpler games do this better because they have less to worry about. But like Mega Man, for example, how much health you enter a boss room with and how much health you're comfortable entering a boss battle with is really interesting. In terms of a game convention, is to feel like you make it through the level and you get to the end, and maybe it's the first time you've reached it and you have very little health left. Like, it makes you feel like that much more on edge, and you know you're probably going to lose, and you're like, okay, next time I'm going to see if I can make it. It gives you motivation to, even though you've beaten the level prior to that, it motivates you to do better on your next run through so that the boss is a little bit easier. Right?
That being said, with Mega Man in particular, like as soon as you get defeated by the boss, you just go right back to the room before the boss. Then like you have full health.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. But like that first point is, that's really cool. And I wish that like more games maybe did that. Because, you know, that is something that like you'd have to keep cognizant of. You know, there's going to be a boss at the end of this thing. So you want to make sure you do well at the beginning of the game because like it's going to be a problem later on in the level. That's actually something we do in Fingeance specifically. We have some characters that can heal you during the game, but like the resources, the health you have in the game, can get dwindled by the enemies before you reach the mini boss and the final boss. And so you need to make sure that you take as little damage as possible so you have as much health as you can by the end of the game.
Yeah, I find that a big motivating factor when I play Fingeance.
And I mean, also a lot of the appeal of boss battles is just the experience in general. Like it's the big bad. So like it's just a larger fight than you have experienced in the past.
Yeah, it has more health, more cool abilities, more challenging things to dodge.
Yeah, I think like the most memorable boss fights are the ones that are just like visually impressive. A lot of the times, I feel like in AAA games, I think I've heard that like a lot of games are designed with the set pieces first, and then like they build out the story with it. And I'm sure that like the boss battles go in tandem with that. Like they'll design the boss battles and then they'll, build out the rest of the game.
That's how action movies are made too.
Yeah. That's
they'll
true.
send a location scout out to pick 5 places.
Yeah.
And then they'll write a movie for it.
That's kind of awesome.
Yeah. So you're getting the...
I mean, awesome or terrible, but
Yeah. But you're getting the greatest experience in these moments. Because that's what they wanted from this.
Oh yeah. It's mindful of like what the point of it is in a sense. Like this is the thing we're making. This is what's important to us.
Yeah.
One other part that I find really cool that a lot of games do is they'll make the environment that the boss is in part of the battle.
Okay.
Like you have to like maybe traverse difficult terrain to get around, or where the boss will destroy part of the terrain as you're moving. So it like makes it both a challenge of defeating the big bad, but also like how can you use the environment both against you or for your advantage? Like in some Zelda games, I think there's like, I forget which one, but one that I watch on Games Done Quick, where like you can use the flagpoles in this boss arena to like swing around and defeat the boss and stuff like that.
Yeah, I a lot of like Super Meat Boy specifically, like I think all of their bosses are literally just like platformer levels, but like you're running away from a big thing or like dodging a big thing or something like that. And so like I really like how they design those boss battles because like they're just levels that you already are accustomed to, but they use the exact same mechanics that you've dealt with, but like in a way that thematically makes sense and makes it feel like it's a different thing, which is really cool. Yeah. But I think like an important thing about like boss battles is making sure that the opponent or that your player can like, deal with certain things. Because if you make it too big, too bad, then like, you just get wrecked and then that's not fun. You need to make sure that like your player can tell when the boss is going to attack and stuff.
Yes, tells are like very important. And when the boss, like some bosses have multiple forms and different things, and you have to make sure that each form the boss takes has a good tell in many different senses to make it easier for players to not have to guess.
Yeah.
Like I think what was in Cuphead were you talking about a boss that like you had to guess like every time? Was that Cuphead?
Yeah, maybe. I like we can talk about Cuphead and the various problems that I had with it, which is a lot of it was because it was a boss rush game. You didn't really know anything about anything.
Yeah.
And you didn't know like, is this random or is it just a pattern I haven't deduced yet? And if it's a pattern I haven't deduced yet, how many times do I have to play this before I can reasonably be expected to deduce it?
Yeah.
You know, it gives you not just like an unknowability, but like the unknown, right? Which is very frustrating.
Yeah. It's, I think that Cuphead did a pretty good job, like with tells. You can kind of really clearly tell a lot of times when the boss is going to do an attack, but it's oftentimes it's unclear what the attack was going to do until it came out.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's enough variety in that game that they didn't all work that way.
Yeah, they're all cartoons.
So you couldn't really even get used to that uncertainty.
Yeah, they're all cartoons, so they can do like anything, and you just don't know until it happens a lot of the time.
I am the very model of a cartoon individual.
But what I really liked about the way Cuphead worked is that like all of the entire game is just a set of boss battles. But like getting to a certain point in the boss battle changes like how that boss looks. And like changes how they interact and stuff like that.
Each boss is 3 bosses.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it's in a way that is good sometimes and not so good other times.
Sometimes
it'll be completely changed and it becomes a totally different thing.
That's true. But like I like that aspect of it because like when you got to a certain point, you're like, oh man, I finally got to this point. What's gonna happen to this boss? And like I got really excited about that. So I felt like I beat one boss, and then like got to a new one.
Yeah,
which made it exciting. But you know, when you've done it the 10th, 15th, 100th time, then it's
the worst part in Cuphead, and this is by design for these types of games, but I didn't have a ton of patience for, which was I would play it over and over and over again, and I'd get past the first stage, and be like, all right, great. Finally did it. It feels good. I feel like all the times I tried was, I didn't feel bored or frustrated by it. It was good. It was tough. It taught me a lesson. Now I know.
Yeah.
And then I go through the second time and I get kind of far because I've learned a little bit, but then I lose. I'm like, okay, fine. I start over. And then I fail the first section like 15 more times.
Yeah.
And it's just like, that's just not fun anymore because it's not, a lot of times bosses with stages are designed in a way so that once you finally are able to beat it, you are given the tools where then it's much easier to beat it the next time.
Yeah.
And that's a really hard thing to do correctly without making it actually easy or making it just a puzzle.
Yeah.
Because those games, as much as I love puzzle games and puzzle bosses, they shouldn't all be that way.
Yeah.
But a lot of times you'll find that it becomes more of a matter of like a muscle memory to do that first or second stage again. But Cuphead was not like that.
Yeah.
It stayed as brutal no matter how good you got at it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very true about it. Yeah, like Monster Hunter, I guess, is also like a set of boss battles, isn't it? I didn't really think about it that way.
Yeah, that's how I thought of it because I don't necessarily like boss rush games. I never played Cuphead or any of the ones on our list of boss rush games, but so yeah, that's why I haven't been really attracted to Monster Hunter because all the monsters that you fight have an incredible amount of health and have very specific like here's how you defeat it. Like you have to hit this place with this ability and things like that. And it takes incredibly long. Like it takes the whole afternoon to defeat one monster, right? So I see it as a boss rush game.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that's inaccurate. Like I think it like you are fighting a bunch of large monsters. And that is like the main draw and appeal of it is like, how quickly you can defeat this monster and stuff like that. So I would agree with that. It's basically a bunch of bosses. That is, I guess that's the appeal of it. But I think like Monster Hunter is a good example of a game that like has a bunch of tells and stuff, but it's still it's still like difficult. I think largely because like you as a player are limited in a lot of ways, in ways that are different from the monsters themselves. They're limited because they're big bodies and they can only do certain things, but like the things they can do tend to overpower the things you can or can't do in that game. Yeah. Did you put raid bosses in this list of things?
Oh yeah. So that is a term from Borderlands, but I take it to mean any boss you can't defeat by yourself in a multiplayer game. You have to bring in other people. It's made for groups to defeat.
Really common for MMOs.
Yes. Yes.
Is it the fact that like it just has a lot of health and it would just take like literally a day to defeat it.
Yeah, it's so powerful. Like, and one attack from it can usually take people out. So
okay.
So it becomes more about like managing your team and like making sure that everyone is alive and stuff like that, and like coordinating your attacks.
Yeah.
It isn't also like the weak point is at a place that only a certain player can reach when another player does a thing. And so it requires teamwork.
Ah, okay.
So they're pretty fun because it's all about working with the team and coordinating that kind of outside the game, metagaming it, which is pretty fun.
I suppose that also provides you with a different experience because like if you're just going through a dungeon as a team, you can kind of just do your own thing. But when you're in a raid boss, you have to cooperate together.
Yes.
It's really cool.
Yeah. So one thing I thought about just now is another good thing to have with your bosses if they are if they're going to really take out your players' resources and stuff is either have loot drops in the boss arena or have what some people call ads, which are
ads.
I don't know what that stands for, but I've heard it on a lot of like streams and stuff.
Okay.
Which are just other little things that are in the arena that you can defeat too without her fighting you. So like the little creatures that are all, like in Destiny 2, you'll have the big boss, but then you have all the regular enemies also coming at you. So you can defeat them easy and get the health drop or whatever.
Yeah, this is the game I think of when is Ratchet and Clank.
Oh yeah.
This is full of that because the game is all about, it's crazy weaponry. So even in boss battles where you have to sort of wait and time, it still lets you shoot things all the time because that's part of the fun. And it's definitely how you get you strategize to get your pickups.
Yeah. That does make sense.
And if you don't manage the ads as they're going around you, they can also overwhelm you too, depending on in some games.
Right,
so.
and that can be frustrating if you like are not prepared for that. You could be like, why is this extra challenge here? But without realizing it's really part of the strategy. And then once you figure that out, then that's one of those things that then definitely becomes really suddenly incredibly manageable.
Yeah.
Once you sort of get your mind around how it works.
Yeah. I suppose you can also use it as a point of comparison because all these small enemies are coming and attacking you and they do little damage. And then there's this big thing coming in and slamming you and then you take like half your health. It makes that thing feel that much more powerful.
Yeah,
right?
you get the comparison right there, as opposed to just in your memory. So, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
So I guess I wanted to talk about memorable bosses that we have known and loved and defeated soundly. So what are some of your favorite bosses?
I really like Kirby bosses. Largely because like the final boss, Kirby games, are all cute and fun and stuff till you get to the end and then it's extremely dark and depressing. Like you literally fight at the end of Kirby 64, you literally fight a giant white blob that's basically an eyeball. And every time you hit it, it like cries blood. And it,
Oh God.
yeah, I don't. I don't know why I love these games so much, but I do. I think that's part of the appeal for me.
Because I think just like Kirby, you're like charming and cute and adorable, but also hide a secret darkness.
Maybe. But I really like those because like all Kirby bosses, all like final Kirby bosses have like 3 states to them, and they always get like more and more creepy and but more powerful as a result of it. But it feels like a really cool moment at the end of the game. I like final bosses in general. Just feel like really cool moments at the end of the game a lot of the time when done well. And I just like Kirby bosses in particular that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like Zelda bosses.
Yeah.
Especially in the older games because in each Oracle of Seasons and Ages specifically are one of the few games they've actually beaten. And it was cool because each dungeon in those gives you a new item that lets you do some new ability.
Oh, yeah.
And the boss is always like you have to use that ability
Yeah.
on the boss and in really unique, interesting ways. And they seem simple conceptually, but hard to actually execute.
Yeah.
So I find those really fun and challenging.
Yeah, Zelda does that a lot where it has its mechanics are really obvious. Like you pick up a thing and you're like, okay, I'm going to be using this soon.
Yeah.
In a way that is sort of like meta-textual.
Yeah.
But in a way that doesn't distract from the sort of richness of the sort of theming and lore of the thing.
Yeah.
And it never lets you forget it's a video game, and that's to its benefit.
Yeah. I feel like Zelda bosses are hit and miss for me because I think the best ones are the ones that feel more like puzzles than bosses. I mean, like they can be big dramatic events, but like you kind of like lose what you learned throughout the temple in order to finally get to this thing and defeat it. And it just feels really cool when like you use all of that stuff you learned in a very interesting and fascinating way that makes it feel really cool when you did it. Like you feel, I guess like the best Zelda bosses make you feel smart at the end instead of powerful.
Yeah.
The Breath of the Wild bosses, some of them were pretty good and some of them I didn't like at all. But the whole thing felt a little bit like not quite Shadow of the Colossus.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's what really colored my impression of how Breath of the Wild did it,
yeah.
which maybe isn't fair, but because Shadow of the Colossus is just a great masterclass in that, in puzzle-based bosses that also are difficult to execute. It's a perfect balance between those two elements. And that's a game that leverages all your existing knowledge as you go, even though you can tackle the bosses in any order.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, you should watch a speed run of that sometime, because then you just get a quick like round the world tour of all of that, all the mechanics and elements, and how they're all little variations on a theme. And it isn't actually that many things. It's just all interacting in a slightly different way that makes each one unique and interesting. And depending on the order you do, you experience the ones you haven't seen yet in a way that is different from someone else who had a different set of bosses prior when they go to that one.
Oh, that's so cool.
It makes it all really interesting and makes it a unique experience for each individual player.
Yeah, wow. I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. I guess Mega Man's like that too, in that you can do it in any order. But Mega Man's a little more frustrating in that way, where you're like, how do I do this?
Yeah.
Like, what weapon do I need for that?
Yeah.
Like,
it's interesting because the way Mega Man works is you are at your weakest at the start of the game, which is how most games work. But like as a result of that, the first level you do is the hardest level you're going to deal with until you like beat all the original bosses. Once you beat one of them, you can use that power up to beat the second boss more easily.
You just don't know which one that is.
Yeah.
And that's sussing it out a little bit.
Yeah.
But also when you get those things, it makes all the levels easier too.
Right. Yeah. So it's like a weird curve. It's like the difficulty curve goes down.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I guess that makes you feel more powerful as a result.
Mm-hmm. So it's a platformer with meta, which is
yeah. Yeah.
I like I've of two minds about Mario bosses.
Okay.
I think 2D Mario bosses are pretty bad. They're either too easy or too difficult, or too boring. Like none of them are really that great.
Sure.
3D Mario bosses, some of the best experiences in video gaming.
Yeah, they're a lot better.
They're so good. Mm-hmm. Even just like the simplest ones, where like in like Mario 64, when I wish I remember the names of all these things, but the big rock slab falls down and you got a ground pound on
King
its Band-Aid.
Yeah. One of those.
But even the simpler ones, when you just hit the ground pound, the wait your turn and ground pound on it, are so fun and satisfying because you do so many of your platforming things in it. And the 3D Mario games have such an expanded moveset that you don't always need all the time. And so sometimes you use them more often in a boss battle, even though they were available to you all this time.
Yeah.
And so it lets you kind of like pull out your bag of tricks.
Yeah.
Which is really fun.
I agree with you for the most part. I do think that I get much more frustrated with 3D Mario bosses when I do not understand how to beat them. 2D Mario bosses are pretty simple. You just jump on the thing or dodge the thing until it...
or throw a shell at it. Or there's a couple of them that are sort of interesting, but there's not a ton of tools.
You just don't have as much moves you can do in 2D Mario games compared to 3D Mario games. But because there are so many opportunities in 3D Mario games, I sometimes will get confused as to what I'm supposed to do. So I'm spending like 10 minutes going, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, dodging the thing's attacks. And then I'm like, oh, of course, I have to hit this thing. And that doesn't feel good to me.
Oh, well, see, that's the difference between you and me, because you don't like the puzzle element as much as I do.
I guess. I guess I want a Mario boss to be like simple, but just like an execution thing.
Right. You want it to be more action.
Yeah.
And I'm much more about the sussing it out.
Sure.
And so I like that balance. And like Mario Odyssey particularly, like every boss leverages environmental mechanics from that level.
Yeah.
In a way that is like so valuable, because it really is like you've been training for this, kind of like the metaphor we were talking about. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of the one where you have to turn into that bird where you poke into the sides of walls.
Oh yeah, I love that.
You have to get on top of that big wooden robot.
Oh yeah, no,
like,
that's a good.
That one is so good because you have no idea how to do it, but you know exactly the tools you need to do it.
Yeah.
And so it's the figuring that out, and so it's really satisfying because it's not like oh, I do that. Like, you know what you have to do. You just don't know exactly how to do it. And then you have to suss that out.
Yeah.
And then it becomes, okay, now that I know how to get there and what the correct path is, now I have to execute.
Yeah.
And then it becomes purely an action game.
Yeah.
And it's super, super fun.
Yeah. Yeah, that boss particularly was really fun. I like that one. That was cool. Yeah.
Any other greatest hits?
I think the best boss ever is from Final Fantasy VI.
There's so many of them at this point.
The one that's 3.
That's 6, yeah.
Okay.
3 in the US, 6 everywhere else, and now commonly known as 6. But if you don't talk about Final Fantasy every day, it's still kind of hard to...
Yeah.
Okay, Final Fantasy VI, where the whole level is on this train.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to go through all the cars and defeat all these things and like solve puzzles in the compartments and stuff. Mm-hmm. Then at the end, spoilers, the boss is the train.
What?
It is so good. You jump out in front of the tracks and have to defeat the train.
Does it like transform or something, or is it just literally
Just
a train? Okay.
It's amazing.
That is amazing. Wow. I want to look that up. That's great.
Yeah. So
That's your number one?
that's my number one. Sticking with it.
Thinking about a recent game, I really liked the Spider-Man's bosses. I mean,
Okay.
they had a great opportunity to use a ton of characters, just like how the Batman games did with the whole, rogues gallery.
Yeah.
But in Spider-Man, they had a thing, these dual boss battles, where they gave you 2 supervillains that were completely different, and they made you fight them at the same time. Mm-hmm. They did it, I think, twice. And they're both really, really interesting. And the environment that it takes place is interesting. One of them is in a shipyard full of shipping containers, and so a lot of it is you hiding and getting the right place to spring from.
Yeah.
And then the other one is completely airborne. Both of them are flying bosses, and so you have to be constantly swinging around these smokestacks. And but each of them require different strategies to take out, and you have to be mindful where the other one is.
Yeah.
Those are very excellent because the bosses themselves are not that complicated. It's the combination of the two.
Yeah.
And that makes it really interesting.
That's cool.
And yeah, it keeps you on your toes, but still engages your mind. I really like that one a lot.
Yeah, that
is so
sounds
cool.
like good design.
Any awful bosses from history? I can think of a few.
There's Borderlands boss, which is basically someone in a helicopter thing, and it's so annoying because the ads are way too powerful.
Yeah.
So, also the only place you can hit the helicopter is on top of this tower,
Oh.
which doesn't always have ads that come up there, or little enemies.
Yeah.
Sorry, I keep using the terminology, but anyway, it doesn't always have little enemies that come up there. So the helicopter thing can immediately defeat you with one hit.
Oh.
And then you're stuck up there in, because in Borderlands, if you are dead, quote unquote, you can hit one more enemy and then it will res you automatically. And so you have to just sit there and wait for your res bar to go, or your fight for your life bar to go down, because there's no one up there to defeat.
To shoot, yeah.
And even if there was, they're too powerful. So you're sitting there like shooting at them and then you still die. So you might as well just hit the like skip button and then you get put way back, but like in the hallway.
Yeah.
So you have to do the whole going down the elevator animation again, and then the helicopter has all its health back.
The helicopter has all its health.
I always have to have Dylan come in and help me with when I get to that.
That sounds annoying. Annoying as heck.
Definitely, there's those cases where a game is like nearly perfect that has like one little like grain of sand in your shoe, and just like those are worse than if the game is just mediocre.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one good example of that is the final boss of BioShock. And because the big twist in BioShock, where you think you're going to be facing down Andrew Ryan, is in fact not that. Spoilers for a 12-year-old game. And in fact is a much more powerful narrative element of the game. Well, you still, by virtue of the laws of video games, need a final boss after that. And so you end up firing this like roided up flame person that just is like, it's a cheap battle. It's not that interesting.
Yeah.
And it's pretty bog standard. And it's not horror or it doesn't have a lot of thriller elements the way that the rest of the fights in BioShock has, and so it kind of just unspools the whole game in a way that's kind of annoying. Which is to say, I remember doing it, and not hating it, but on reflecting on it, not liking it at all.
Sure.
And that's almost like a difference. Like mechanically, it wasn't the worst. It just didn't fit with the rest of the game at all.
Yeah.
In a way that, and it's there's plenty of more online complaints about why this is bad, or maybe an impassioned defense or two. I'd be curious, but. But that's the thing. When you design these things, it has to be like, we talked about this, like of a piece. It has to fit with your game.
It does, yeah. Can't just throw a random boss from the city into the jungle. Doesn't work.
unless that's the shtick.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Then that's the game.
Yeah.
I think like the newer Ninja Gaidens, the 3D ones, I tend to not like those bosses very much. Because a lot of times with a lot of them, like you get used to a certain moveset that you have to deal with when you're going through the levels, and then the boss has what feels like near instant attacks, not enough things to tell you that they're about to do a thing.
Yeah.
And they'll deal a ton of damage to you. And like the first 10 times you do it, you don't have a full picture of it. And then finally at the 11th time, you can like use your knowledge to try to figure out how to beat the boss. But like in the beginning, it just feels like you're just getting beat down and you literally cannot do anything.
Yeah.
And that doesn't feel great. Those are ones I don't like very much.
One last thing I wanted to talk about
was
some really good boss design is in Vengeance.
Oh,
I love those bosses so much because you've made them so that each one has like unique mechanics and interesting things you have to do to defeat them. And they feel just challenging enough that you can die pretty easily to them, but also if you figured out how to get them, then it's pretty fun.
Yeah.
So I like them a lot, especially like the I like all of them, but I like the guy that comes at you. What?
Oh, the one that charges at you?
Yeah.
The giant death ray?
Yeah.
Yes.
And the biggest, baddest turret.
Yes.
And the and the squid mama who sends little baby squids at you.
I wish I could take credit for a lot of the boss design, but most of the boss design is because of Lane Davis, who works on the game with us on it. And like he does a very good job. He spends a lot of time like making sure that the boss is like visually appealing but still like tells enough information so the player can react to things.
Yeah, I want like little action figures of all the bosses.
Yeah.
So cool.
What's nice too is that like I think you've described the process to me. You use a lot of temp art, or Lane does, when putting it together.
Yeah.
And then Charles goes in and sort of paints them over with what the design was supposed to be. But it lets you do sort of a very creative gray boxing that kind of gets you most of the way there.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting. And I think that's really effective because all the bosses thematically make a lot of sense. So when you they're all these fantasy mix of like undersea creatures and giant robots.
Yeah.
And so they're completely made up and have no analog at all to anything, but like they make a lot of sense. What they do tracks with what you expect them to do.
Yeah.
Even though each one is a totally unique experience and requires a different type of strategy. So like the giant death ray requires a lot of like risk reward, where you're like, how long am I going to keep shooting at it before I get out of the way?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then like the big jellyfish, it has waves of its children coming at you, and they all sort of slowly, like zombies, come towards you.
Yeah.
So that's a matter of like managing your resources and how much to attack the ads versus the boss, right? And then there's the I forget the name of it, but the one that it has a couple of stages where it knocks down these pillars at you.
Yes. Oh man, that's from a recent one, and I can't remember it now either.
Right. It's probably the newest one, right? And that one's really interesting because it requires a lot more cautious play.
Yeah.
Which up to that point in the game, you've been slowly teaching yourself to not play cautiously because you get better at it.
Yeah.
And that's a really good thing where it pulls the rug under from you in a way that is really satisfying.
Yeah.
So each one of them is different, and they all leverage different things about what's fun about Vengeance in a way that's really focused, which is really, really cool.
Yeah.
So everyone should look at that as an example.
Yes.
We should put some GIFs or something in the notes so people can get a good look at these things.
Ooh, yeah, I think I got a bunch of I'll link to some. Yeah.
And like Vengeance could be just, you do in fact have a boss rush mode, right?
Well, we don't have a boss rush mode. We have a time attack mode that you can fight the bosses, but we do want to put a boss rush mode in.
It's a game that could work for that. But because the levels themselves, they're not I wouldn't call them short, but they're not extensive. You get to a boss pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Like you're never like, when is that boss coming? Like you're always getting there, which is like really good. It's paced really well.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's just enough level. And I think this is where it compares, not to make a direct comparison, but where Cuphead has a couple of platforming levels. They're all kind of terrible.
Yeah.
And I think your game does a much better balance of like the sort of like bog standard gameplay with a lot of interesting new ideas. But then really just, it's very boss focused.
Yeah.
In a way that you would almost not expect, but doesn't overwhelm. It feels like a really great balance.
Yeah. And like the levels themselves are kind of like extensions of the boss battle. Like you have to get to the level to get to the boss battle, but like as a result, there's a boss at the end of it, so like you have to be cognizant of that and try to manage your health and stuff and make sure you don't lose too much of it, so that like you are prepared for the end boss. Yeah.
The one thing that's probably missing from Vengeance is what Martha was describing with raid bosses, where because the teamwork is a big pillar, design pillar for Vengeance. And but what's also good about it is that you can be a team player by playing selfishly. Yeah. Right. That's a really cool. It makes it very approachable.
Yeah.
But I would like to see a boss that requires specific teamwork.
We've toyed with that. The issue is that Vengeance you can also play by yourself.
Yeah. So it would be maybe mode or I'm just imagining there's a way to do it.
We've totally thought about that, and I think that like we have some things concepted that like could work for us like a multiplayer only boss.
Yeah. It's tricky because you have to decide like, well, is this something we add as a bonus? Is this something that we try to incorporate into the core design? Or is this something we decide this game doesn't have?
Yeah.
And I think any of those are valid choices.
Yeah, it would be really good because it is. Teamwork is the core. But
you could certainly you could find a way to have your cake and eat it too. You could have a boss where playing alone, there's that one strategy, but playing with a team and executing the perfect strategy is like insta-kill. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then that becomes a little more puzzly than I think either you or Lane are excited about. But like, but you know what I mean? That you wouldn't have to change the design of it at all. It would still just work in both scenarios.
Yeah.
Where if you execute like masterful teamwork, then you don't have to execute masterful Twitch shooting.
Yeah.
Or something.
Yeah. No, that's good. I like that.
With that is our show. If you haven't already, subscribe to Nice Games Club in your favorite podcast app, and be sure to give it a good review if you liked it, or a nice like us. We mentioned it at the top of the show. We got a bunch of new listeners, and we'd hope that you can give us some help in finding even more. But hey, all you listeners who've been around since the beginning, we need your help too. So leave a review, and be sure to tell all your friends too.
And thank you for listening.
Yes,
we
thank
really
you so much.
appreciate it.
That's the thing is, it's the people who told their friends because they were also nice.
Yes.
That got us where we are. And so as much as we asked for more, really we're dependent on you, and we thank you so much for listening and engaging with us, contacting us on Twitter at Nice Games Club, sending us emails, contact@nicegames.club. The feedback form.
Yes. I was going to say contact at nicegames.club.
nicegames.club/feedback.
Yeah. Give us your feedback and let us know what we're doing wrong, because we really appreciate that, and we're very thankful when we get that kind of a response from people, because it helps make the show better.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, awesome. And of course, you can find out more about the show and your nice host, as well as get all the links and show notes and Vengeance GIFs from this and other episodes at nicegames.club. So until we start again, remember to
play nice
and make nice. Congratulations. You have defeated the Nice Games Club boss. Now, here is...
Wait, are we like a three-headed boss, or is it's like Steven the boss?
I thought I was doing the grunt.
And then you and I are the endlessly respawning minions.
Okay. I'm over here. No, I'm over here. Pay attention to me.
We could be like different thematic bosses.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Maybe.
Well, when someone makes the
Nice
Boss
ga-
Rush adaptation of this
Yeah.
podcast,
Right, yeah.